Brunelleschi, Filippo was one of the foremost architects and engineers of the Italian Renaissance. He is perhaps most famous for his studies of linear perspective and engineering the dome of the Florence Cathedral. Bruni, Leonardo, Florentine, who first gave the name Humanitas to the learning of grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, politics, and moral philosophy based on the Greek and Latin classics. Castiglione, Baldassari. City-states. The Courtier. By Castiglione, it described the ideal courtier or attendant at a court as someone who had mastered the classics and several languages and who could paint, sing, write poetry, advise and console his prince, as well as run, jump, swim, and wrestle. David. 18-foot sculpture by Michelangelo that stood for many years in the Great Square of Florence, and it has been one of the most popular sculptures in the world. Doge. In Venice during the Renaissance, this was the chief executive elected for life by the Senate, a body which represented the nobility. Durer, Albrecht. Leading northern artist, a German who blended the northern and southern styles. He made 2 trips to Venice, where he studied the southern styles, but his work clearly Erasmus, Desiderius. Ferdinand and Isabella. Gutenberg, Johann. German goldsmith and printer of Mainz, Germany, developed mutable type. His printing press printed the Bible. Heretics. Christian judged to be non-believers or false believers were persecuted by the Catholic Church. Humanism. A Renaissance intellectual movement in which thinkers studied classical texts and focused on human potential and achievements. Most new works by Petrarch and Boccaccio were written in the vernacular and expressed the accomplishments of the individual. Inquisition. Tribunal originally set up to monitor the sincerity of former Muslims and Jews who had converted to Christianity. Italian Renaissance. A period of intense artistic and intellectual activity said to be a rebirth of Greco-Roman culture from roughly the mid-14th to mid-15th century, followed by this movement spreading into the northern Europe during 1400 to 1600. Louis XI of the Valois family and did a lot to centralize power during his reign from 1461 to 1485. Machiavelli, Niccolo, author of The Prince, emphasized realistic discussions of how to seize and maintain power, one of the most influential authors of the Italian Renaissance. Medici, Cosimoda, head of Medici Family, supported by a few patrician families who helped to banish prominent members of the most powerful rival clans. Medici Family. A wealthy merchant family that ruled over Florence as uncrowned rulers. Great patrons of the arts includes Cosimo and Lorenzo. Medici, Lorenzo da. Politician and promoted the family's power with his extravagant patronage of the arts. Mona Lisa. A painting by Leonardo da Vinci of a woman with a mysterious smile. It is now of the most readily recognized paintings in the world. Reflects the humanist interest in individual facial expressions and in painting realistic landscapes as backgrounds. More, Thomas, the author of Utopia, believed that society, not people, needed improving. Was a minister of King Henry VIII, but because he had conflicting views he was executed. New monarchs. Oligarchies. Rule of merchant aristocracies controlled much of Italy by 1300. Papal States. Ruled by the Pope and formed another important power during Renaissance Italy. Patriarchs, patriarchies. Male heads of the family in 15th century Italy. They were societies dominated by men. Petrarch. Popolo Grasso. Fat people. The elite in Italian city-states, including nobles, wealthy merchants, and manufacturers, made up around 5% of the population. The Prince. A short political treatise about political power, how the ruler should gain, maintain, and increase it. Machiavelli explores the problems of human nature and concludes that human beings are selfish and out to advance their own interests. He believed it was better to be feared than loved. Raphael. Italian Renaissance painter. He painted frescoes, his most famous being the School of Athens, famous for his Madonnas, died young. Reconquista. Beginning in the 11th century, military campaigns by various Iberian Christian states to recapture territory taken by Muslims. In 1492 the last Muslim ruler was defeated, and Spain and Portugal emerged as united kingdoms. Renaissance. 1. The time period which Europe flourished and the rebirth. The love of the classics. 2. The great period of rebirth in art, literature, and learning in the 14th–16th centuries, which marked the transition into the modern periods of European history, began in Italy. Renaissance man. Multi-talented, skilled in many areas, arts, math, science, music, architecture. Example, Leonardo da Vinci. Republics. In Italy during the Renaissance, Italian states were divided into two categories. These were based on the old medieval communes or associations with free men who sought complete political and economic independence from local nobles. Rhetoric. From the Greek for orator, this term describes the principles governing the art of writing and speaking effectively, eloquently, and persuasively. The School of Athens. Scholasticism. Attempt to reconcile the beliefs and values of Christianity with the logical reasoning of Greek philosophy. Secularism. An indifference to religion and a belief that religion should be excluded from civic affairs and public education. Treaty of Lodi. A treaty between Milan, Naples, and Florence against Venice and the Papal States. It fell apart when Milan and Naples began to feud. Tutors. Utopia. A work that presents a revolutionary view of society and describes an ideal socialistic community on an island somewhere off the mainland of the New World. He created the name Utopia as a good place which is no place. Book by Thomas More. Van Eyck Jan. An important painter of the Northern Renaissance, he is credited with the first use of the oil glazing technique of painting. He is also known for the great detail in his work. His most famous work was the Arnolfini wedding. Vasari Giorgio. An Italian painter and architect who is today famous for his biographies of Italian artists, considered the ideological foundation of art historical writing. Vernacular. Everyday language of ordinary people. Vinci Leonardo da. Renaissance man, great artist, engineer, scientist, and inventor. He created the Mona Lisa. War of the Roses. 1455 to 1485, a war between the York family and Lancaster family of England for the crown. The struggle was ended when Henry Tudor, who was on the Lancaster side, won. He became Henry VII, the first Tudor king.